The Department of Human Settlements has tabled its budget in Parliament yesterday and has also spoken about its plans with regards to the violent protests over land and housing that is sporadically erupting across the country. The Financial and Fiscal Commission, which is the FFC, has told Parliament on Tuesday that the Department of Human Settlements will be one of the government departments that would suffer as a result of cuts in allocations outlined in the 2018 appropriation bill. Now, the question of land redistribution was one of the topics that were discussed in the department's budget outline in Parliament. But joining us now to talk to us more about the budget tabled yesterday is Neville Chainee. He is the Deputy Director General from the Department of Human Settlement. Neville, good morning to you. Thank you so much for coming through.
Morning, and thank you.
Now, let's just start with the violent protests that we've seen, of course, across the country due to lack of houses and land grabs, of course, taking place. What's the department's plans around the redistribution of land to address these problems?
Thanks. As indicated by Minister, there's four areas that we've identified. One of them is land assembly. And in relation to land assembly, what we have identified is that a more proactive, a more responsive, and a more expedited land assembly strategy will be adopted by the department. We have an agency called the Housing Development Agency, which is specifically tasked legislatively to deal with that. And part of that process will be for the release of service standards, because I think what we have in our engagements with the communities, particularly in Gauteng, what communities have indicated to us is that what we've got to be able to do is provide them with the opportunity to get security of tenure. So that's part of one of the stabilization strategies in response to what communities have indicated to us.
And staying with those service delivery protests, let's just talk about the issue of land and housing. Do you think there's enough land available to build these houses on?
Obviously not. I think the issue is that, when you build a house or when you establish a community, what we have to be able to do is to take a whole range of technical evaluations in place. And, in a place like Gauteng, for example, the assumption is that there's all this land available, but not all of it is suitable. Because you'll know, for example, in Gauteng particularly and other parts of the province or of the country, we've got what is called dolomitic conditions, there's issues around wetlands, there's environmental considerations. So the available land that is there, suitable for human settlements or housing or even other development for that matter, is limited by those constraints. What we have to be able to do then is to better utilize it and make sure that the priorities and impact is greater. So one of the things that we've got to be able to do is look at more densification and more medium density, particularly in our urban centers.
Yeah, and now looking at the statement by the Financial and Fiscal Commission, it's very worrying. I believe you would agree with me. The fact that 10 billion rands the department will see a 10 billion rands budget cut over the medium-term period. Will this not impact on the current housing backlog that the department has, that of 2.1 million?
It will impact, but I think what we have to be able to do and ensure is that, government has different priorities, and at different times there will be different reallocations and prioritization. Obviously, within the bigger context of it, yes, we can as a department indicate that we have suffered, but I think what we need to be able to do is what is the impact in relation to where that money is gone. And I think we know that there are other pressing constraints and pressures, and I think we're realistic about that. I think as a department, together with Minister, we've indicated what we then have to do as our contribution is to accept that reduction, but then also not use that as an excuse, but also make sure that we better prioritize and ensure that the money that we get is better utilized and the impact is greater.
Yeah, the issue of lack of houses is one of the pressing issues that South Africans are faced with. People are complaining for being on the waiting list for forever. So what happens now? Will the department have to come up with other funding ways, maybe, but looking into public-private partnership?
We are. I think if you know that Minister indicated in a budget there's four pillars. One of them, as I've indicated, was land. The second is improving the funding and the leveraging of the current budget. I mean, we get a budget of 32 billion. One of the things that we've asked ourselves is, are we leveraging that with the private sector? And I think that's an area where, for example, we need to realize the provision of housing is not only a government responsibility. Yes, government has the responsibility, particularly in relation to the poor and vulnerable, but there are the banks, the mining houses, private sector companies all have a responsibility. And I think what we're asking is, or the strategy going forward, is to be able to better leverage that money. We've got 32 billion, and I think the question is, what can the private sector contribute to make this a shared sacrifice in relation to how we achieve this for all our citizens?
Yeah, and we do know that provinces like your Free State and the Western Cape have also come up with a program called FLISP to sort of respond to these challenges. We have to leave it at that. Neville, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Neville Chainee. He is Deputy Director General from the Department of Human Settlements, talking to us about the department's budget outline as well as the issue of land. All right, 23 minutes.